We're going to talk to Peter, who's calling in from Canada. Peter, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yes, I want to talk to you about abortion. Before I start, I'd like to know, what is your position about? How do you feel about it?
What is my position about abortion? I am pro-choice, broadly pro-choice. I do believe that for most extenuating circumstances, it is appropriate for a woman to, have that procedure done. Obviously there's very rare circumstances where it might not be the appropriate action, but for, most cases in when somebody wants to have that done, it's entirely appropriate to do so.
Okay, so
Richard,
I'm going to
did you want to say your point too, or?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so
yeah, Peter?
I just want to tell you right now that I am pro-choice, and I think that that abortion should be illegal before 15 weeks or illegal in general.
Okay, so
yeah,
cool. So you think abortion should be legal within 15? Sorry, did I hear that right? Within 15 weeks?
Before 15 weeks, or before even 6 weeks, because at that point it's a human being with a heartbeat, and at that point you're committing murder.
Okay, so you do have a hard cutoff point. After you said, I'm sorry, it's a little hard to hear. Did you say after 6 weeks, it's a human being?
Up until 6 weeks.
Okay, so 6 weeks is your cutoff point, and your cutoff point is because it has a heartbeat and it's a human being.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, in other words, if it didn't have a heartbeat, it wouldn't be a human being. And if it does have a heartbeat, it becomes a human being.
Yes. Plus, it's also, it's not fully aware yet, but it has some sense of awareness. Like, for instance, a newborn baby, a fetus can know when it's hungry, when it's thirsty, and it kicks the mother to know, like, okay, it's time to feed me. Like, it's alive.
Okay, so awareness is also is pretty much that criteria, is what you're saying.
If you're aware, I didn't hear that.
Okay, gotcha. So this is an interesting belief. Richard, do you want to ask any questions about this?
I'm interested that and let's take a complete stranger. I don't know what kind of person you are, but let's just assume that it was somebody you didn't like. If somebody you didn't like needed a life-saving lung transplant, and you had to get, I don't even know if this is possible, so but I'm not a medical doctor, so let's just bear with me for the sake of conversation. If you were forced to give one of your lungs to that person to save their life, how would you feel about that?
The two scenarios are not comparable. It's not at all.
Why?
First thing, I did not.
Why aren't they comparable?
Need to transplant because I did not put the person who needs to transplant in that situation, nor did I create them. A baby is inside a woman's womb, and she created it, and she had a choice.
Do you think women have? Do you think those who have wombs have always had the intention to create another life?
Well, they may not have to create another life, but they were aware that it could happen. They assumed the risk. Why should
you think they're all aware? You think in every time they're aware that it could happen?
You really think there's a woman on Earth who doesn't know that sex can lead to pregnancy? Do you really think there's a woman who does not know?
Yes, I 100% do. Yes, because sex education, Peter, is a privilege that many people in this world do not have. And the kind of consequences that happen with sex are not fully known to a lot of young teenagers. And that's unfortunate. And it shouldn't be the case, but it is the case. And so those situations happen every single day.
Mankind has been having children since long before sex education came into existence. People know how babies are coming to it. People know.
No, a lot of Peter. There are cultures right now on this earth did you know that believe that when a woman wants to get pregnant or they want to conceive, that they take all of the men in that particular village to insert their sperm so that they all get people from the village to create that child. In other words, there's cultural beliefs about sex all over the place that don't match our understanding of it. Okay, I'm just bringing you one specific example, but like worldwide, this idea that we have about our comprehensive sex education is not shared universally amongst all humans. So I have to reject that, and historically that has never been the case either.
Well, I'm not talking about the whole world. I'm talking about the United States. And in the United States,
okay, there's definitely people in the United States that don't understand the full implications of how sex work. There are some people in the United States that think that if you have a condom, then you're 100% completely safe no matter what. There are some people in the United States who think that if you take a pill, that you're 100% safe no matter what. There are people who don't fully understand the consequences of these actions. And again, it happens every single day.
And I'm not in the United States, and neither are you.
How is abortion the solution? Tell me. How is abortion the solution?
How is abortion the solution?
Yes.
Abortions prevent unwanted pregnancies. In other words, they stop situations where people who can't necessarily care for that child, are able to care for them. They prevent a life from suffering, a life that would otherwise not grow up in the best of circumstances and not have the appropriate attention. Peter, if you please, I'll let you speak, but you can't interrupt me. Okay. Now, I've already lost my train of thought, but you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I don't see how the child should suffer for the choices of the parents. Plus, the women who are choosing to abort their babies are doing so because out of convenience, or it's an inconvenience for them. It's not because they can't afford it. They can't afford it.
I think you're assuming motives. I think you're assuming motives about people. Yeah, and I don't think you can. I don't think you have the grounds to do that.
Yes, I do. I know exactly how it works.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you know the truth, Peter. I'm glad you know the truth of every single person with a womb who's ever gotten pregnant, because I sure as hell don't, and I would never go so far as to claim that I do. I would also add that, we obviously have a different idea of suffering in the sense of what capacity a fetus is actually suffering, in its development. I personally don't think at 6 weeks. That's what. Peter, I let you know, Peter. Peter, I'm going to mute you, Peter. I said that I would let you speak. I would let you speak, but you cannot interrupt me. You cannot interrupt me. This isn't that kind of show. Okay. Well, we'll let you go back to this, but yeah, we obviously have different conceptions of what's actually suffering, and that's going to cause an impasse, because what you believe is happening at 6 weeks and what I believe is happening at 6 weeks is not the same. And unless that gets resolved, we're probably going to have very different ideas about what's right and what's wrong in these situations. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, like I said, I agree with you that we do have different definitions. However, I just want to point out that the people who are pro-choice or people who are proportioning that at the highest levels, they have an agenda, which is to A, eliminate black people, and B, we as humans do not have the right to decide who lives and who dies. And plus,
so you think because I'm pro-choice, Peter, I have an agenda to eliminate black people?
Not you personally, but the people.
Oh, not me. Oh, but somebody out there has the agenda, even though I'm out here giving a pro-choice opinion on a podcast that goes out to, several thousand people.
Well,
right?
That's because you've been brainwashed. I have no argument with you.
Oh, I've just been brainwashed.
Peter, Peter, who is it who's controlling and brainwashing us to have these ideas?
I would love to know that too.
The Democratic Party.
Okay.
Peter, I'm pro-choice and I'm in Britain and we don't have a Democrat Party.
Well, your version of it.
Our version of it.
Our version of it. They got connections, They go overseas.
Clearly.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I don't know how interested I am in continuing this conversation. I'll be honest with you, especially if you're going to keep interrupting me while I'm talking. But, this has now gotten to the level of assuming the motivations of women who are pregnant, people with wombs who are pregnant, something which you have absolutely no right to do, and you clearly have no knowledge of. And I'll be honest with you, Peter, I'm going to make the assumption about you that you have never actually known somebody who's going through that decision, because I think you would have a lot more empathy for people's situations. There's a myriad of reasons why people are going to choose to have an abortion, and it's none of your goddamn business, but it's also something that I think you should take into a wider consideration other than they want to eliminate black people, because that is silly. Absolutely silly. Even if you just think that's a small minority of elites who are doing that, it's absolutely nonsense, and there's no evidence to suggest that you should have that kind of belief. That kind of thinking is going to really diminish your ability to relate to other people and convince them that what they're doing is wrong. Because again, several times you decide to make assumptions about people and their actions, and that's never good to do. So as a personal advice to you, Peter, I would say actually talk to people who have made this decision and see what motivating factors are happening there, and really try to just honestly empathize, because it's not something that you're probably going to ever have to go through. It's not something I'm ever going to have to go through. It's not something Richard's going to have to go through. And so I think we as people who don't have wombs and who can't actually do that for themselves should probably learn to listen before we speak about this kind of stuff. And that's really all I have the patience for as far as this conversation. I don't know if I want to continue with that, but Richard, do you have any other thoughts with that?
So many rabbit holes were opened.
Yeah.
It's just when we were talking pre-show before I disappeared about gish galloping, that's a perfect example of it. When one idea is challenged, just jump onto the next thing and the next thing. You give a perfectly reasonable response to the question, so then he jumps onto, well, it's black people. Well, we're being controlled. Well, you're brainwashed, and it's just one thing after another, and that's a perfect example of what a gish gallop is.
Right. What I wish could have happened was I wish I could have continued with an SE approach and continued to ask about this definition of life, of human life, because that's an interesting thing. I think a lot of people have ideas about that they may not have fully explored. I think it's still open to debate, honestly, of what it really means to say when a human being starts to become a human, or if that's even a meaningful or coherent concept. Obviously, we have, I tend to go towards like viability outside of the womb, right? That's what I talk about. But even then, it's not a bulletproof argument, right? Because like that can vary from person to person too. So it's difficult. And I don't know if all the answers are there when it comes to that side of the argument. But when we're talking about suffering in a fetus, we might be able to explore that a bit more. I personally don't think a heartbeat is what makes someone human. No, at that point, I don't think that's a good definition. But
it was kind of treating it like every woman chooses to get pregnant, and then they're just completely wrong. So there are no circumstances that lead into the, so every situation is exactly the same, and that's just not the case.
Right. Or like when people even understand or realize that they're pregnant. I mean, Peter maybe comes from from Canada, where sex ed is better. Sex ed is not great in the country that I live in. And while I couldn't tell you, stories from my personal life, anecdotes of people, I can tell you that there are lots of stories out there to read from people who didn't understand the full implications of sex. And maybe that sounds silly, but it's a real thing. And you have to understand that that's where people are coming into this. So this idea of, they knew exactly what they were doing. No, they didn't. And especially in the cases of victims of sexual assault, right? There's no intention there whatsoever for pregnancy, but it does happen. So anyway, that's a topic I wish we could have had a better conversation with, but we got into some weird territory there.